back. This is Family Time 188. We are revisiting self-management. We're talking about mindset. There was a study that was done. I shared this with those of you at Summer Strength and Conditioning. We maybe talked about this some in Character and Leadership.
Testing.
You know what?
Testing, 1, 2.
I'm just going to let that go. I'm going to let that stay in the video because I've been trying to record these during my prep, trying to squeeze this in right now today. And today is the day that Deanne is testing the sound system. And it's not her fault. It's okay. But it keeps interrupting me. And I'm not restarting again. So there you go. Little peek behind the curtain. This will come out not next week, but the following week. And there you go. There's the testing 1, 2, 3. All right, moving on. Mindset. There was this. There's another one coming.
Testing, 1, 2.
Study that was done with elite tennis players. And they were trying to find something to differentiate those who were routinely in the top 5 in the world from the others that were in the top 25. So we're talking about still the elite of the elite, the top 25 ranked tennis players in the world. And why were the top 5 still separate? Why were they a step above? Why were they routinely in the top 5? Because at that level, there's not a clear distinction between physical ability or physical training methods, practice methods, things like that. So they wanted to see if they could hone in on the mental side of things. Was there something mental that separated them? And they found when they talked about self-talk during the match, that was something that clearly differentiated those top 5 from the other high-level tennis players. And those in the top 5 had very positive self-talk, even when things weren't going well. If they lost a point, they'd be like, okay, next time, here we go, next one, I got the next one here. Or, even complimentary to the other person, like, oh, geez, hey, that was really good play by them, but I'm coming back. So they were continually being positive and even taking time to be like, hey, you know what? How lucky am I that I get to do this thing, that I get to be here playing at Wimbledon, or that I get to have tennis be my career. In matches, they were having those moments where they were taking it in and enjoying it. And they found that the other athletes, high-level competitors, would get negative about things, would get discouraged. They'd fault on a serve, like, oh, it'd be frustration, like, oh, I can't believe I'm blowing this. And that was a big thing that they found that separated those two groups. So our mindset is so important. Our perception is our reality, right? How we view the world, how we go through the world. And too often, we think that we don't have a lot of control over that, right? Or we let outside forces impact our mindset too much. We say, oh, this thing happened, so I'm upset. Or this person did this thing and that made me angry. Instead of recognizing that we have control over our mindsets. It's not always easy, it takes work, but we can control our mindset, our perception, how we go through the world. I want to talk about a few different things related to mindset that you might talk about in psychology, we talk about in character and leadership, talk about in coaching sometimes. But they're important to understand. I'm going to talk really briefly about them here. We'll expand on them a little bit in my classes, but some ideas I want to understand. One is the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, right? Extrinsic motivation are external things, okay? The rewards or punishments. Think about if we use extrinsic motivation for ourselves or we're using it when we're leading someone else. We use extrinsic motivation a lot because it's easy, it's readily accessible, right? It's easy to control. Here you did a good job, you get something, you get a reward. You did something that was considered undesirable, there's some sort of punishment or constraint, okay? It's easy to manage those things. However, those things will only take you so far. Eventually, we want to get to an intrinsic motivator. We can do these things with ourselves. We can give ourselves a little rewards when we accomplish something. But eventually, we want to be intrinsically motivated. Like we want it to come from inside because it's what's best for us, or it helps lead us to who we want to be. Okay? Difficult thing with that is it's a lot harder to influence. It's a lot harder to influence someone's intrinsic motivation. There you really have to build a relationship. You have to build a culture. And that's what we want to do ultimately, but it's harder than just controlling external things. Okay, so it's one idea I want to throw out to you. And that comes down to something that's discussed in psychology a lot, theory X and theory Y. Theory X states that people are primarily externally motivated. Theory Y suggests people are more internally motivated. You can make an argument either way. Certainly there's a combination of both that impacts us. Other things I want to talk about is task orientation and ego orientation. Being task-oriented would be focusing on the skill or the characteristic you're trying to develop. We talk about this in sports. A lot of my background comes through sports psychology, my graduate degree stuff being in sports science. So in sports we talk about if you're task-oriented, you're playing a sport, you're focused on how do I perform this better? Right? How do I do my job better? Ego orientation would be more about like, well, how do I win? How do I look good? Right? There's a balance there as well. Ideally, talking, well, really in anything, but when we talk about it in sports, there's another.
Testing, 1, 2.
When we talk about it in sports, we want to be primarily task-oriented. Because if you come into a game and you're like, well, I'm going to win, that's great. That is the overall goal. But you don't have total control over that, right? You don't have control over the other opponent. You don't have control over the conditions. You don't have control over what the other team does. You can only control what you can control. You can control yourself. You can control your contribution to the team. So that's being more task-oriented. I'm going to focus on my task. People who are highly ego-oriented fall into problems because they would rather look good than do something well. So they'd rather play, for instance, a lesser opponent and look good than be challenged and actually improve. That becomes a problem. Now, the most successful athletes are highly task-oriented and have some ego orientation. Not totally free of ego orientation. Because you can't be the best without wanting to be the best, without desiring to be the best. So there is a little bit of an ego, but we don't want that ego orientation to be so far that you get negative with other people or you would cheat, for instance. A really high ego orientation leads to people who do unethical things. We don't want that. Okay? And that leads into another concept that's the motive to achieve success versus the motive to avoid failure. I want you to be motivated to achieve success, to do things that are difficult, to do things that hurt a little bit sometimes, that challenge you because that's how you grow, because I want you to succeed. I want you to achieve success, not avoid failure. That goes back to that ego orientation where it's like, I'd rather have things be easy so I'm not challenged, so that I can look good. That's not helping you in the long run. That's not what I want for you. I don't want all of you to have these easy, uncomplicated lives. I want you to be strong enough to deal with the challenges in life so you can learn and grow and develop into the person you want to be and develop the life you want to have. And that takes challenges, and that's the motive to achieve success. So I threw a lot of stuff at you there, but I want you to think about those things this week. I want you to consider the goals we talked about at the beginning of the school year and the areas of potential growth in your life that we discussed last week. And I want you to think about things you can do. Consider the stuff we talked about, like extrinsic motivators, intrinsic motivation, task and ego orientation, motive to achieve success, motive to avoid failure. Think about it within that framework and consider what are some things you can do to help you build a mindset to achieve these goals, because that's what's really important. You can set all the goals and tasks that you want, but if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to get there. So I want you to think about those things and how you can advocate for yourself. Take steps to build that mindset that is resilient, that is a gritty mindset that will allow you to face challenges and learn and grow, because that's the only way to get what you really want in life, I assure you. So let's focus on developing our mindset this week. We'll talk more in class. Until next time, much love.